Joining me right now is Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations and Appropriations Committee. Senator, it's good to see you. And, of course, Matt Rosendale's comments come after President Trump tweeted on X that Biden should fire Defense Secretary Austin because he was not transparent. And his number two was also either sick or on vacation. We don't know what. She wasn't there either. But the president was not told that Austin was in the hospital until 4 days later. Your response, your reaction?
Well, accountability is a word that Joe Biden can't spell, Maria. I certainly don't expect that coming from the White House. But here's what happened. Let's talk about the severity of the situation. While Secretary Austin was incapacitated, I understand that there were 8 attacks on Americans in the Middle East. He was incapacitated, out of business. When did Kath Hicks become available that she was the deputy secretary? When did she know that was happening? Evidently, she was on vacation in Puerto Rico when she became the acting secretary of defense. This is at a time when we have mounting pressures around the world. Here's what needs to happen. Secretary Austin is a responsible 4-star general. He should understand the chain of command. He did not take responsibility at the gravest mistake that I've seen our military undertake, and that's the failure of Afghanistan. But here he ought to ask some very serious questions. What would happen to a subordinate who vacated his or her command and didn't tell anybody? What should General Austin do in this case? I think he needs to take direct responsibility. I don't expect the White House to do it, but I certainly think that General Austin ought to be thinking very hard about the responsibility that he takes for this dereliction.
So you believe that he'll consider stepping down? Do you have any idea what's wrong? Is he okay?
I don't know, and I pray that he is okay, Maria. I'm glad to hear that he's out of intensive care. But our nation needs to be okay at the same time. And whatever happened, whatever failure occurred at the Pentagon, I think it just underscores the fact that this Pentagon and this administration are so unserious. They're more worried about their pronouns that they're fixing over there. They're more worried about abortion policy than they are about the lethality and the effectiveness of this force. What Lloyd Austin needs to be worried about is our effectiveness in making certain that we're ready at all times. And the notion that our troops were attacked 8 times while he was incapacitated is absolutely shocking to the American public.
So what about that? I mean, we're talking about a total of 128 attacks on our troops in the Middle East in just the last couple of months. This is since October 17th. What should the response from this administration be? Because obviously we've had no response. I don't know if that's the work of Lloyd Austin or Joe Biden.
Maria, you and I both know that the core of all of this goes back to Biden's appeasement of Iran. Iran is behind everything that's been happening in the Middle East. Do you think the Houthis built those weapons? Iran is using their technology, they're using their training, and certainly their funding to unleash this war in the Middle East. This wasn't happening under President Trump. The maximum pressure campaign was working. We had Iran's reserves below $7 billion. As soon as Joe Biden came into office, he stopped enforcing sanctions on Iran. Now they're well over $100 billion by our estimates, and they're using those funds to come in and disrupt the entirety of the Middle East. We're losing control of the Red Sea. That's 15% of all of our commerce that moves by sea. What we have right now is an unmitigated disaster. This White House needs to wake up, snap back the sanctions, put maximum pressure back on Iran, and stop the source where it lies.
But why are they not, okay? Why are they not? They just eased sanctions on China. Is this because he's compromised? Why are we easing sanctions on our #1 adversary? Why do we have a wide open border? I mean, do you have any answers for any of this? Why?
Maria, we don't have any answers to the situation in China. We know what Biden family relationships have been with China. With respect to Iran, this is Obama's failed JCPOA policy that they just have religiously gone back to. And with respect to our southern border, this is a crisis that has been unfolding ever since Joe Biden came into office. They're continuing to allow it to mount. I think we all know what's underlying this. This has to do with the Electoral College and with votes at the end of the day. California was plus, or I should say the Democrat states were +4 about calculations I've seen in the 2016 race in terms of electoral votes that were manipulated based on the overcounting of illegal aliens that should not be, counted in the system. That number is probably up to 7 or 8 electoral votes right now, given the 7 to 8 million people that have come into this country illegally that are being attracted to sanctuary cities in blue states. That attraction will yield more congressional seats and more electoral votes as a result. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're willing to allow our southern border and our nation to suffer as a result of it.
How incredibly disturbing. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas reportedly admitted to border agents in Eagle Pass that 85% or more of the illegals coming into the country are actually being released into the country every day. Initially he told Fox it was 70%. Now we understand 85% are being released. And Senator, the problem is that they get a court date in like 10 years. Okay, come back in 2030, come back in 2029. So, you know, what are they doing for that 10 years that they're waiting for a court date, since 85% of them are being released into America?
Now, why don't we ask the people in cities like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and San Francisco? They are overwhelming the system. And what they're doing is they're pushing Americans out. We're seeing people vote with their feet and leaving these states, again, back to the original point. That's why the Democrats want to backfill the loss of citizens that are moving to states like mine in Tennessee with these illegal migrants that are going to, again, bump up the count for the next census and give them votes that they don't deserve in the Electoral College.
So what about the current state of affairs? You're fighting over spending, and the Republicans have dug in, saying we're not going to agree to any of this unless you see border policy changes. Congress officially back to work, now racing to meet the first of these two government shutdown deadlines. The Johnson-Schumer bipartisan budget agreement facing plenty of criticism. How do you see it?
I think it's going to be very bumpy here over the next several days, Maria. You've seen the Republicans speak en masse when Chuck Schumer tried to bring a broken bill to the floor with respect to the supplemental that would include, aid for Iran, aid for the situation in Ukraine, aid for Israel, and some aid for the Indo-Pacific region. The Republicans put that down completely because it did not deal with the border. All of us stood united, all 49 of us. We need to stay united and force this issue to the fore.
So do you think you'll make progress here if you stay united and you don't agree to any changes? Because Johnson has this top line number of $1.59 trillion, but the Freedom Caucus is saying no. This is exactly the Nancy Pelosi numbers. It's actually more like $1.66 trillion in terms of a top line number on budget.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is remain focused. I know that there's been a good deal of work underway, but I've not heard yet sufficient progress to make me think that we're going to get to where we need to be on the border. And back to where we started, Maria, the most significant crisis, the most significant national security crisis we face right now is at our southern border. There's been nobody better than you in reporting on this just since October, just since the attacks by Hamas on Israel. We've seen over 150 different nationalities apprehended at that southern border. And again, the Biden administration is looking the other way. As Mayorkas admitted, they're processing people in here more rapidly now than ever before and just letting them go. It has to come to an end. We are at a breaking point. The American public is speaking loud and clear. I certainly heard that at home in Tennessee.
Senator, it's great to have you. We'll be watching your work on this issue, of course. We understand the importance. Thank you for that. Bill Hagerty joining us this morning.